So good morning and good afternoon, wherever you might be joining us from today. I know we had folks who were registered for this from across the country in each of our time zones. My name is Gregg Descheemaeker. Our topic of today is it's a discussion with InterVision and Juniper Networks around transformative network solutions in the state and local government and education space. By way of introduction, I'm the Vice President for Public Sector for InterVision. I'm joined today by Stephen Savas, Vice President of State and Local Government and Education for Juniper Networks, and Tom Wilburn, who is the Global Vice President for Campus and Branch Networking with Juniper. My pleasure to have you both joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Greg.
Yeah. I'll do just a quick, to expand on intros, and then I'll hand the ball over to both you to do the same. Just a bit more about myself. So I've spent the entirety of my career in the SLED market, channel space. I was with Intel for a number of years, and then back with InterVision here. I joined InterVision just shy of a year ago. InterVision, if you don't know InterVision, it's a company that's been servicing our customers in the market for over 30 years now, with deep subject matter expertise in the areas of consulting our customers around architectural design, professional services deployment and integration, and world-class managed services for running and maintaining our customer infrastructure and cloud environments. Stephen, why don't I pass the ball to you?
Sure. So I'm Stephen Savas. I'm the Vice President of Sales for SLED for Juniper. So I run Juniper's business for government education nationally. I was hired to actually build out the vertical. Much like we'll talk about in this call, there's never been a better opportunity for AI native technology in the SLED space. Juniper saw that and actually built a vertical around that technology for our customers to support them. We've got a national organization that partners with partners like InterVision to really show customers how we can change the way that they actually leverage technology, deliver more value at less cost, and really kind of drive the outcomes that they've always struggled to drive. And I think I'll turn it over to Tom, but as we talk about it today, such a great, unique opportunity. And that's what brought me to Juniper, to leverage a differentiated technology that is purpose-built for our SLED customers. And with that, Tom, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Greg. I'll take it, introduce myself, and we'll start, if that's good. As Greg said, I lead the campus and branch business at Juniper. That's our switching, wireless, SD-WAN, and NAC technologies. I've spent my entire career in networking, the last 20 years focused on Wi-Fi. I ran Cisco's global wireless business for about a decade, spun out to create a company called Mist that was acquired by Juniper 5 years ago. And that's the technology we're going to talk about today. So I thought, since AI is so hyped these days, I would ground our conversation in some real life issues that you probably face. So on this screen, I'm showing a user, perhaps somebody in your network, that's having a bad experience on the network. And if you're like most IT organizations, you will not know about this user's bad experience unless and until they open a trouble ticket. And here's the fact: most users don't. Your CEO will not. If you're a student in a university, you will go on social media. If you're a user in an airport, and I had this experience literally 2 weeks ago, this was a customer of ours from Robert Half, who happened to be in the Albuquerque airport after an event, and he had a terrible experience, and there's nobody to turn to, and the person running the network doesn't know about the bad experience. If the network is up, the assumption is it's working well for users. So this user resorted to social media. So before I go further and describe what we do about it, let me relate a personal story that really made me focus on what this is all about. I was coming back from Europe a couple of months ago, and to get to my home in Boston, I had to connect through Montreal. After an 8-hour journey across the ocean, I landed in Montreal and they said my flight had been canceled. And worse yet, the weather was bad up and down the East Coast. They wouldn't get me out until the next day. I tried everything. You can't rent a car in Canada and drop it in Boston. And finally, I resorted to walking up and down the airport and looking for a flight. And I found one. And it was leaving in 20 minutes and going to Boston. But as you would expect, it had a wait list of 20 people ahead of me. And there was no way I was getting on my flight. Well, I knew there's one seat on every airplane that goes empty 99% of the time. This seat is called a jump seat. It's reserved for other airline pilots, and it's reserved for the FAA and check rides for the airline to see how the pilots are doing occasionally. I knew that seat was empty, and I knew they weren't going to give it to me, but I had to try. And so I asked the gate agent, I said, hey, I'm a pilot. Is there any chance I can get the jump seat? He didn't say no, but he asked me which airline I flew for. And then I said, well, not exactly. I'm a private pilot. And he didn't say no again. He said, ask the captain. Long story short, I asked the captain, Canadian airline. He said yes. If his crew agreed, his crew agreed. Then the captain said, well, get him on the manifest. I'm getting on the plane and we're taking off in 20 minutes. They had me on hold, and I thought for sure that Air Canada Corporate would say no. But as they were about to close the door, this thing printed out. And sure enough, I had a ticket to fly in the jump seat. And I jumped in. And this is the picture of the crew that was flying the plane with me sitting between them. That's me, and that's the airplane on approach into Boston. And I got home early that day. But for me, it was a flight of a lifetime because I've been flying for 40 years. And I think today you're flying blind in your network. And on this airplane ride, the minute we took off, we went into the clouds. We couldn't see until we broke out over Boston and landed. But here's what I observed happening on that flight. Real-time telemetry changes everything. These pilots had 2 radar systems they were monitoring while the entire flight was automated. The co-pilot took us into the air. The pilot called out his V-speeds. He then connected the flight director and the airplane took over. They were watching 2 radars, one tuned to what was out 5 minutes in front of us, one tuned to what was out between here and Boston, so we could navigate around the thunderstorms in real time and make sure we didn't get trapped in a hole somewhere. It was simply amazing because as I'd been flying in smaller planes, I had no real-time telemetry. I got a forecast, tried to stay away from the bad stuff, and you can't see anything when you're in the clouds. That was an eye-opener. There's a capability I'm going to talk about in networking called client visibility, which is unique to Juniper. I'll come back to that, but that's our onboard weather radar. While I'm sitting there, a bell goes off over my head while they're navigating some thunderstorms. And I see that the icing system in the airplane is automatically activated. At that altitude, we were picking up some ice. The system detected it. It activated all the systems. This was completely new to me. In a small airplane, as the pilot, you're watching the windscreen, you're watching the leading edges of the wings, you're constantly monitoring to see if you pick it up, then you have to manually remediate it. These 2 pilots focused on keeping us safe. The system took care of everything else. And that's what I'm going to talk about today in the network with AI native network operations that allow you to focus on designing networks and not firefighting why a student or a CEO or another executive or any user on your network can't connect. This automation has made aviation incredibly safe. I got a firsthand look at it. It was a great day. But now let's talk about the network. Here are 2 comments from customers. Both of these happen to be running school district networks. And what automation has to start with is that telemetry, that visibility. These 2 customers describe how game-changing it was when they moved to the technology that we're going to talk about today. But outside of education, the Gap retail store, 3,700 locations around the world, were having trouble automating mobile point of sale, where an associate has an iPad and rings you up in the aisle. And they couldn't figure out why. When we replaced their Meraki network, there was nothing wrong with the network per se, but they had no visibility. They were flying in the clouds without the radar. They said that what Mist did was like turning the lights on in the store, and they could diagnose every problem. So let's get into it and let's see what happens. What I want you to know, if you're in state, local, education, or any of these systems, the technology I'm going to talk about is not prohibitive. We're about the same price you'd pay for a Meraki or a Cisco system. And if you look at the results from this year selling to school districts, highly competitive, federally funded, Juniper is the fastest growing company in the industry, while most companies are retrenching a bit after the pandemic. At this growth rate, we'll be the largest company in state and local educations within a year, bigger than Cisco, Meraki, or HP Aruba. So I want you to know it's a compelling technology that you can afford and that is priced competitively. The other thing I want you to know is I started my career in wireless in 2002 when companies like Aruba, Trapeze, and Airspace existed. And for the last 20 years, for a large organization, you've had to buy the architecture on the left. It's a bunch of premise-based equipment, not only the APs and switches, but also controllers, which are appliances that are brains of the network, and then various other services that you have to integrate to make that network operational. And while it has served us well, I was the CRO for a company called Airspace that Cisco acquired in 2005. And we built this to a multi-billion-dollar business with 2/3 of the global market. As great as it was almost impossible to automate. All of the efforts, Cisco had a product called DNA, Aruba had one called Mobility Masters. All of these have failed in the market. And it's just very difficult to automate this system. So the one thing that everybody in the manufacturer community agrees upon, whether it's HPE, Aruba, Juniper, or Cisco with their Meraki offer, is the future of our industry is cloud, because it makes all of this possible. You cannot stream the telemetry you need to have useful AI without a cloud architecture with elastic storage and compute behind you. What I want you to know is I believe today that Juniper is the only company that's capable of delivering all the features of a controller on the left on a cloud that can support Fortune 1. We actually do, the largest network in the world, 400,000 APs, 80,000 switches. But we can also do a large university campus or a large state agency. And no other cloud, to my knowledge, is doing that today. So the future is available. You can get these capabilities. And whether you want to move or not, your vendor is going to ask you to move to cloud in the next few years, because that's where all the growth is in our industry. So how did we get a step ahead? In December of 2012, I and the founder of Mist acquired a company called Meraki while we were leading Cisco's business. And it was an exciting adjunct to our portfolio that added a capability for small and medium customers with little or no IT staff that wanted most of the capabilities of our controller offer. But by the summer of 2013, our big customers were saying, we don't like this. And I couldn't figure out why, because we had something for everybody. And they said, you're asking us to choose between a controller architecture that has all the capabilities I want and a Meraki cloud that is simple and easy, but is missing those capabilities. And we realized they were right. So in July of 2014, with funding from Cisco and Google, we stepped out to build a next generation architecture that could deliver all the capabilities of a controller with the simplicity of Meraki deployment, but then go one step further. I started this presentation with this fellow on a bad Zoom call. The difference now is 10 years later, with the benefit of AI, we can not only tell you that that user's having a bad experience, that fellow in the Albuquerque airport, the IT organization would know about it without reading about it on social media, but we can also tell you why. without saying send somebody out with equipment and try to figure it out on your own. AI can do this, and we do it. This has made us number one in the industry, full stop. This is a very mature industry. No other company has risen to the top of a Gartner MQ, and Juniper for switching and wireless has had that position for the last 3 years in a row. But we also excel in Juniper's Magic Quadrant for indoor location services. This is the network that your facilities team wants to buy to understand how many students are in a classroom, or how the conference rooms are being used post-pandemic, or how the office space is being used. In fact, Stephen right now is in our corporate headquarters with a major US university whose facilities team simply wanted that information. Do I need a new building? Really? Can I use the space I have now? So when the IT team picked Juniper as the wireless network from the left MQ, the facilities team said, I don't need a separate network. I can go with Juniper and we can do both on one. Let me talk about how that works. But I want you to know that this is a compelling position. Gartner drills down. If you're a customer, you can get this report. And they say, well, tell us what you're buying. Do you want to buy switches only or wireless only? Do you want to do it for a branch office? Do you want hands-off network operations? And regardless of which category you start in, Gartner's ranked us number one. It is a compelling lead in the industry. And I say that to you not to brag, but so that you realize it's worth taking a look at before you add to your current network. So what do? Every organization is embarking on a digital transformation of some sort, and it starts with the network. What we can help you do with AI is deploy your network faster at lower cost with fewer mistakes. In the largest company in the world, we replaced 3,000 access points per night. At Dartmouth College, students replaced 2,000 access points in dorm rooms over a weekend. It is a true zero-touch deployment. But where things really get interesting is in day two operations. You are not going to believe what I'm going to tell you, so let me just accept that. But I will show you quotes from customers, the largest companies and universities in the world, that have eliminated 90% of their trouble tickets. And for the ones that remain, reduce the time it takes to close that ticket by 90%. So since I wouldn't believe that if I was you, all I want you to do right now is to say, what if when I refresh this network or add 10 APs in a new building, what if I tried this Mist technology? And what if I could simply reduce it all by 50%? I've not had a customer report that low an improvement. It's typically 80 or 90%. I want you to know that despite the hype, AI is real. And then we can help deliver outcomes for your organization by integrating these location services in. The world's largest healthcare provider justified the replacement of their Cisco wireless network, 150,000 access points, based upon changing the patient experience in the hospital, providing an app that looks like Uber for getting a wheelchair, providing an app that looks like Google Maps, but you have a moving blue dot inside a building in a hospital so a patient can find their next exam room or radiology or whatever. So all of this comes together to change the network. So how compelling is it? These are the largest universities in the world. These are the largest companies in the world. And I only name them because think about the investment they have in equipment and training. Why did they make the change? It's because they asked to see the equipment work. And what they saw was real-time telemetry. We are actually able to measure the experience of every user on the network every minute with no client software. If it has a Wi-Fi chipset or an Ethernet chipset, we're monitoring user experience in real time. That gentleman in the Albuquerque airport Had he been connected to a missed network, we would have known with no user intervention. We would then alarm on that, but not necessarily bother you. We would then kick in with AI to do what a human being would do if you could stay awake 24/7, and if you had a sniffer and you could be sitting next to every user on the network. And that is absolutely true. We're the only company in the industry that can dynamically trigger on all these events a packet capture with no human intervention. That means we have the crime scene footage of every bad experience on the network. We then still don't bother you. We'll do an automated root cause analysis. We'll determine whether we can change power or channel or fix a missing VLAN. And if we can do that, we do it. If we can't do it, then we tell you what the problem is. You've got a user next to the American Airlines gate. He can't connect because your DHCP server is overwhelmed. I can't fix that server, but I can tell you what the problem is. We do all of this on a modern cloud. If you've seen a Meraki cloud or HP Central Cloud, it is not the same animal. This cloud does not come down for maintenance windows. This cloud is running UPS's global logistics network, Amazon's fulfillment centers, the world's largest company, all aspects, corporate headquarters, distribution centers, stores. This cloud, we delivered 15 major releases of software last year with no disruption to users. And then we build everything into the network to allow location services. The customer that Stephen is hosting can turn this on in software once the network's deployed, and we can track assets, we can track people, we can track utilization of buildings and space. And we do all of this through the only architecture. We designed this 10 years ago. It was an API first from the beginning. So everything we present to you in our dashboard is accessible through an API. There is no other company on the planet that can do that today. Are these APIs interesting? They are. We're now doing cloud-to-cloud integrations with our APIs with popular apps like Zoom and Teams, so that there's a problem in their network or on the user's desktop, we now have telemetry to solve that as well, not just the network. We do integrations with other platforms. The most popular one is ServiceNow. ServiceNow replaced their global Cisco network with Juniper, wired, wireless, SD-WAN, and NAC. They started with wireless incrementally. They didn't replace all the Cisco APs overnight. They did it as they had budget, but they realized that it was dramatically transforming network operations. They experienced a 90% reduction in trouble tickets. They then took our network, the full stack, and integrated it with the ServiceNow app. If you're a ServiceNow customer, you get this integration free if you have Juniper and ServiceNow already. You can do day 0, day 1, and day 2 operations from ServiceNow. If you've had trouble maintaining a CMDB, your database of network inventory, it's automatically updated and populated by ServiceNow. So it's automation at the highest level because ServiceNow trusts Juniper to automate within the network itself. If you're not a ServiceNow shop, if you use somebody else for automation and trouble tickets, you can do the same thing the IT team did at ServiceNow, and we'll help you. It really makes your life easier. Again, I told you you wouldn't believe these AI claims. I hope you'll allow these customers to speak for me. These are their results. The Gap rolling out their automation or their point of sale system, 85% drop in the times they had to go to a store. ServiceNow, I mentioned 90% drop. MIT, we replaced 10,000 APs in 4 months on their campus during the pandemic, and they were thrilled with the results. So you can get a full stack, but you can start anytime with any component. So if you're thinking, well, I'm refreshing 20% of my network a year, boy, it's going to be a hassle to introduce another vendor. Please insist that Stephen, Greg, and I provide you some equipment because our customers consistently report it is easy to manage a missed network with some legacy equipment than a pure legacy network. Because the missed component actually tells you what's wrong. And we do it for wired, wireless, SD-WAN, and cloud-based NAC. It actually works the way this screen tells you. Instead of saying there's somebody in the airport and they're not happy, we actually tell you what the network couldn't fix and that we need you to do. And if that's not enough for you, there's a conversational interface, a large language model. Your level 1 help desk can type in, why did my CEO have a bad Zoom call last Tuesday? And our AI engine will tell you the answer. And it's amazingly effective. Again, you have to experience it. The last thing I want to talk about before I wrap is we've introduced something that you'll hear about with AI. It's the concept of a digital twin. Let's say you're in the data center at 1 o'clock in the morning, you're changing a firewall policy, you're worried about interrupting service, so you do it at 1 a.m. when no users are on. And the problem is when you've made that change, you've upgraded something, changed the policy, you won't really know until 9 in the morning when the network is loaded that everything is working. No longer. We now have a digital twin for every user on the network that's continuously active. If your DHCP server fails at 3 a.m., nobody's on the network, we tell you. If your DNS fails, we tell you. If your key app goes offline, we tell you. If you change a policy and you take out half the network, we give you blast radius. We tell you exactly who was affected, even when no one's on the network. It's so compelling, we can do a dynamic packet capture on synthetic traffic from a digital twin to actually tell you it was your DHCP server. So I'm going to close with this. This technology is affordable. It is competitive, and it is game-changing. It is not the same old Oldsmobile your father drove. So no matter how you start, we've had customers start when they had a problem area, the executive floor, remediation. We've had customers start when they had a new building. I need 10 APs. Call us up. We've had customers that are doing their natural refresh, whether that's all at once or 20% a year. All of those situations work, and I assure you there's no retraining. If you know how to manage a legacy network, you can jump in this car and drive it today, and it will interoperate with your current systems. So Stephen and Greg, I'm coming back to you. There might have been questions in chat. I just want to thank our audience for joining us and challenge you to challenge us.
Yeah, Tom, thank you so much. And we are at the bottom of the hour. The one word I would add to what Tom was using there as he wrapped up is that it's also approachable. And when I think about our SLED market, and especially, if there's any one true statement that has existed over the past 25, 30 years of me being in this market, is that there is no overabundance of resources when I walk into any of our customer environments. And when you look at the logo slide that Tom presented, there were a lot of big names on there like UBS, AWS, etc. But the reality of it is the real promise of this in this audience is that for state and local government and education, and especially in those environments where you are resource constrained and you don't have the unlimited bench of people to be able to monitor and utilize the stack of tools that are out there, this is one of those areas that really, it is approachable, and it can be deployed in a way that you can have immediate impact and benefits, as Tom indicated. Stephen, did you have any other comments that you wanted to share there?
Yeah, I would just echo your sentiment, and the fact, if you looked at the upper left-hand side of that slide, the largest universities, the largest K through 12s, and some of the smallest, we were growing the business at 68% year over year. It's because it works, and it's because it is very approachable. And there has never been a better time for our state and local and higher education customers to take advantage of the technology.
Yep,
And
100%.
our users report that it takes the firefighting off their hands so they can work on network engineering, the things that.
Correct.
Yeah, well, and
Reactive
it excites us as a partner because you talk about the open APIs, the ability for us to, as a value-added partner, to go in and help our customers if needed, to really get that level of customization needed. And then if chosen to run in our managed service environment, you mentioned that ServiceNow platform. Guess what our platform of choice is within our managed service space? It is exactly that. And so it's such a compelling story, not only for our customers, but for InterVision as a partner. So with that, team, we're 2 minutes over. I apologize about being over, as you know, from my decades with Intel, we're pretty adamant about being prompt in terms of our start and stop times. Thank you all so much for joining. Again, this will be, it is recorded and it'll be available to come back to after the fact. We'll keep you posted on any more events we have coming up in the future. Tom and Stephen, thank you both so much, not only for today's session and what you shared, but just for the incredible partnership as well.
Thank you, Greg.
All right, thank you. Take
Thanks,
care.
everybody.